Came just hours after an Islamic terrorist attack near Lyon in France. One suspect was arrested after he stormed a chemical factory. The body of a decapitated man was found at the scene. We heard from a witness who works near the plant. The caller preferred not to be identified.
We heard an explosion in the morning. Only later did we find out it was a terror attack, but we don't know anything else. We heard the explosion at around 10:30. Then there was a big flash of light. We didn't know what was going on. Several minutes later, we heard the sounds of fire engines and police. You can't see anything from where we are. We can't see what's happening on the street. That's why I don't know how many people are there, but I think all the emergency services are there.
RT's Peter Oliver is across the very latest. Peter, once again, we're crossing back to you for more. And at this point, tell us more about the attacker and the victim. What has come to light now this hour?
Well, the decapitated man has been identified by security officials as a local business owner, the manager of a delivery company. As it stands at the moment, he hasn't been named. However, he has been identified as this small business owner, and the latest is that he was killed before the explosion that was caused after one assailant drove a car into the chemical plant. Now, we heard from the French Interior Minister, who brought us up to date with the very latest we know about that assailant, who has been the main suspect, who has been taken into custody right now.
The identity of the criminal is not officially confirmed, but we believe it could be Yassin Salih. He was put on File S, the watch list of those who are suspected of having ties with radical extremists, in 2006 over his potential radicalization. But he was removed from that list in 2008. He did not have a criminal record. The inquiry will allow us to have a better idea of his profile.
Well, that man, Yassin Salih, who you heard there, the French Interior Minister saying is the suspect who's in custody. His wife has also been detained. Now, it's understood she made a phone call to a French radio station as the news was breaking, saying that her husband had gone to work as normal and that they weren't radicalized, that they were a normal Muslim family. Well, as more information comes to light, we did also hear from the French President Francois Hollande, who left a summit in Brussels to head back to Paris to deal with this situation from the ground. He talked about the only reaction that anybody can have is an emotional reaction, but saying that we have to get beyond those emotions and address the real problems that are the crux of terror attacks like this.
The attack is of a terrorist nature, there is no doubt about it. A decapitated body was found, along with a written message. We feel emotion, but emotion cannot be the only answer. There must be an action, and we must never give up.
Well, there are going to be real questions asked towards French security services, because this man, Yassin Salih, had been under surveillance between 2006 and 2008 after he was deemed a potential risk for radicalization and in his involvement with a radical Salafist movement. There's going to be questions asked why he was removed from that watch list, especially when we look back to the beginning of this year in the Charlie Hebdo attacks, where one of the brothers there had also been under surveillance and was also able to carry out an attack. Now, the explosion that took place on Friday, that was at a chemical plant and could have potentially been a much more serious terror attack. So there's going to be questions asked about why this man was able to carry out this attack while he had been under surveillance, why he was taken off that list, and also people are going to be looking at the security of sensitive locations like this chemical attack. So lots of questions to be asked of the French security services right now.
Peter, thank you for bringing us the very, very latest to us. And of course, we'll be crossing back to you for more information, for more of what has been discovered and came to light. For now, though, Peter Oliver will let you go, and we will, of course, cross back for more. And in case of the consequences that could follow the latest French attack, one of the key questions is whether innocent Muslims will fall victim to a public backlash. Political analyst Chris Bambury says the religious split in French society is likely to widen.
to be careful with the blame game. And we need to be understanding, but by doing that, by saying the problem is Islam and the Muslims, we're also playing to ISIS's card. I recall at the time of the 7/7 bombings 10 years ago in London, that the vast bulk, 99.9% of Muslims, came together with the rest of the community in condemning those bombings carried out by young British Muslims. And that is something which actually, 9/11 was not dissimilar, and the very immediate response to Charlie Hebdo. And that is something that could be built on. But by playing the blame game, and the blame game very quickly developed after, if you remember, the Charlie Hebdo attacks in that way, it really cuts that off. So I think we have to be very careful here, not playing the blame game, which is going to create, I think, more alienation and, as I say, playing to ISIS's hands.
Back in January, France and the rest of the world was left in shock by a brutal sequence of al-Qaeda masterminded attacks in Paris. The Charlie Hebdo satirical magazine had almost all of its staff shot by cold-blooded terrorists, while a kosher supermarket in the Jewish neighborhood of the French capital was targeted by another Islamic radical. It ended up in a siege and a fatal police storming. The French public were outraged with the Muslim community bearing the brunt of the violence. A watchdog reported more than 200 Islamophobic acts in the first quarter of 2015, and that's a six-fold increase compared to the same period last year. Tensions have been running very high. A Muslim man was stabbed 17 times by his neighbor in revenge for Charlie Hebdo. And mosques have been attacked and desecrated with swastikas and other Nazi graffiti. And this Muslim girl that you will about to see on your screens was bullied by her school for her choice of clothes. Well, this is the situation that we have right now. And in the studio, again, we have Daniel Bushell with more analysis, more insight as to why things like this happen, as to why communities are marginalized. And looking at the French situation, looking at what's happening in France, Daniel, have there been any comments on why the social split over Islamophobia has been growing in the first place? What have been the reasons?
Yeah, lots of reactions coming in. French, of course, traditionally pride themselves on their respect for human rights, their tolerance, and traditionally they have welcomed Muslims into the community. There's some 6.5 Muslims in the country. That's the largest population in the EU, but relations have deteriorated since the Charlie Hebdo attacks you talked about in January. Islamic groups have recorded a six-fold increase in attacks on Muslims since then. And in a recent poll, more than half of French citizens think Islam is not compatible with French values. 66% of French people say there's too many foreigners in the country. 59% believe, quote, immigrants do not try hard enough to integrate. And according to French intelligence, Muslim groups, Muslim students in particular, creating their own groups which are cut off, in effect, from non-Muslim students.
Well, has there been any opinion on how to fix it? I mean, today we have discussed with so many experts the situation, in fact, the grave situation that exists in France and other European countries. But any perhaps ideas on how to solve some of them?
Yes, solutions have been proposed to, quote, demonstrate to the world that France and Islam are fully compatible, in the words of French politicians. Muslim leaders in turn suggest things like turning abandoned or unused mosques into, abandoned unused churches into mosques. They think that that would be a sign of goodwill. There appears to be a split within the Muslim community itself, though, with lots of Muslims angry that they're being tarred with the same brush. So this is the work of a minority, a very small minority of Islamic fundamentalists, and yet the whole Muslim community is being blamed. And of course, the 2011 French attack on Libya, which was led very much by the French government, has helped to alienate the population, and of course has become a breeding ground for those self-same Islamic fundamentalists.
Well, certainly the roots of the problems are very deep, as we can see, and solutions are not always found on the surface. Daniel, thanks so much for talking to us and giving us some insight and providing us some figures there. And let's now look at how the social media reacted to this. And of course, it's no surprise that after today's attack, there has been a lot of reaction in the social media. Some straight away pointed out that the French government may have brought the horror upon itself by funding and arming Islamic State at the start of the Syrian conflict. One Muslim activist called the attacker a monster, emphasizing it's the holy month of Ramadan in the Islamic world, a time of mercy and love. And others accuse the French government of a systematic failure to crush Islamic terror and paying too little attention to the threat. And now you can see the